from a class warfare standpoint, but we're really hurting ourselves because we're taxing job creators.
Well, you're absolutely right. I'm going to make a wild guess here, and guess that there may be countless people listening to us talk right now, and they may be throwing a bottle at the radio because they're probably sitting there saying, if I hit $1 million, I would gladly pay higher taxes. And of course, you're right. It's hard to make the case on this, given all the economic pain in the country. Something jumped out at me this week when there was an article discussing these tax increases. There are 450,000 families in America that make make $1 million or more in taxable income every year. 450,000 families. They are currently paying 21% of all the taxes that are sent to Washington, D.C. In other words, what this group of 450,000 families is responsible for 1/5 of all the revenue collected by the federal government. So they're already being taxed at levels much higher than I think the average American understands or knows, given all this class warfare rhetoric.
And to follow up on that, Gary, it seems to me, the president's rhetoric is always just say we have to make sure the rich pay their fair share. Well, if you got this small number of people paying 21% of the tax burden, it seems to me they're paying more than their fair share right now.
There's no question about it. Now, there are cheats out there. There are people that have 50 accountants, and they're looking for every possible way to avoid taxes. And I'm all for throwing the books at people that are violating the law. We ought to do that. But the idea that well-off people are not paying their fair share, if you live in any of the high expense states like New Jersey, New York, California, et cetera, you're already paying 54% of all your earned income to the federal government through federal government, state government, and other taxes. But the biggest problem here is that all this talk about the taxes and the class warfare takes our eye off the ball, which is the out-of-control spending that Obama just keeps loading up. We're now up to 48 million people on food stamps. That the Obamacare law has added $1 trillion to the deficit. Even if these tax hikes on millionaires goes into effect, it will only take care of the deficit for 10 days. And then we're right back to every other day of the year. So we've got a mess, and this deal being worked out in Washington won't come close to fixing the problem.
Hey, Gary, what's the political calculus there? This is sort of a whip count question, but, John Boehner's proposing this Plan B will raise taxes for everybody who makes more than $1 million. President Obama's already said he's going to veto it, no dice. It's never going to get through the Senate, so it's kind of dead in the water. So even if it were to pass the House, it would sort of, be a political gesture, but not anything substantive. But I wonder if he's even going to be able to get the votes together in the House to pass his Plan B tonight. What's your guesstimate about what's going to happen?
I'm going to guess that he does get the votes because he put in the legislation all the budget cuts too. He did that overnight, and I think that will make it easier for a whole lot more people to vote for it. And then somewhere along the way, I still think there'll be a deal between the president and Boehner, probably at the very last minute, maybe even January 1st or 2nd or 3rd, which is the last day for this Congress. But again, it won't solve the problem. And one other thing to say in Boehner's defense, if there is no deal, everybody's taxes are going to go up on January 1. And the media and Obama are unfortunately in a very strong position to make the American people think that will be Boehner and the Republicans' fault. And that's what's scaring him and a lot of other conservative Republicans in Washington.
Talking to Gary Bauer from the Campaign for Working Families. I'm Tim Wildman with Brian Fisher. And I want to ask you, Gary, about this I hate to be pessimistic on this. I don't think the Republicans, and I certainly don't think the Democrats, know what to do about this debt and this spiraling deficit. Now, maybe you know something I don't know, but when Paul Ryan, who suggests this, his budget was cut $2 trillion over 10 years. Is that what it was?
Yes.
Okay. I'm not laughing because it's funny. I'm laughing because that's called draconian. All right.
Yes.
That's called, oh my word, you got to be kidding me. So we have a $16 trillion debt, which is spiraling out of control. We have a deficit. That's the annual amount of money that the government spends that we don't have revenue for. That's a $1.3 trillion annually, and this is with interest rates very low. As Evan Bayh from Indiana, the former Democrat senator said, you better hope that interest rates don't go up, because then to service our debt, which is already 40 cents on every dollar, we have to, folks, listen to me. You pull out a dollar bill, okay, and for every dollar bill you pull out, you have to pull out 40 cents extra to pay for the interest or the debt that we're borrowing. So my point is, Gary, and again, I hate to be a doomsday. I guess I'm following the Mayans here, but I just don't see. I don't see how in the world our country is going to keep from imploding in the next 2 to 4 years from this debt, because even the Republicans, I don't think, have a serious answer to this problem. Now, put a smiley face on that, if you would, Gary.
That is one difficult thing to put any kind of face on. Let me tell you.
Well, they call me Captain Sunshine around here.
Yeah. Look, you're absolutely right, number one. Number two, one of the things that has to happen is significant economic growth. That won't solve the whole problem, but economic growth will bring in a lot more revenue, and it will get people off food stamps, welfare, all these, aid to families with dependent children, and that combination will take hundreds of billions of dollars out of this problem. So we've got to have that economic growth, and I don't know whether we'll get it or not with the things that the Obama administration is doing. And then to make it even worse, look, politicians at the end of the day just don't want to be unemployed. So they do what they think the public wants them to do. If you poll on this, Americans want the deficit to be brought under control. But if you bring up to the American people all the ways to do that, they oppose virtually every one of them.
You know what I found, Gary, in talking to conservatives, the same deal. Everybody says, yeah, we got to cut spending. And then you start talking about the programs that you'd like to see them cut because you think there's waste or they're unnecessary or they're unconstitutional. And I'll get conservatives say, oh, no, we can't cut that one. Because my family benefits from that. I like that one. That's a good federal program. Yeah, you can cut all the other programs, but we got to keep that one because that benefits my family. And every program like that is going to have some conservatives who have some reason, whether they're thinking clearly or not, to think, yeah, I think that's a good federal program. So I don't know how you start cutting. Unless, Gary, you were to say, okay, we're just going to cut spending across the board, everybody's going to feel the same amount of pain, same percentage of pain. I don't know how else you do it.
Well, that may be the best approach. Let me bring up an easy one, but I know people will scream about it, and that's this idea of raising the retirement age on Social Security by 2 years over the next 20 years. In other words, the proposal isn't to raise it this year so that people who thought they were going to retire will have to wait to. It's doing it over 20 years. It would save a load of money. The public even opposes that.
Hey, can you stay with us for a minute, Gary?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, through the break. Gary Bauer's with us. How do people get your
they can go to ouramericanvalues.org.
ouramericanvalues.org.
Right.
I want to talk to you about the whole gun control debate when we get back. Also, some have suggested that Secretary Hillary Clinton is faking a concussion so she doesn't have to testify on Benghazi before the Congress. We'll get Gary's medical analysis after the break.
On the next Today's Issues,
When all else fails, read the instructions. Don Piper, author of 90 Minutes in Heaven, draws on his own first-hand experiences with the joys of heaven, as well as lessons found in the gospel in Getting to Heaven, described as a set of departing instructions for the battles ahead as we strive to live a happy, fulfilling, purposeful life on earth while preparing for the glories of heaven.
Today's Issues, every weekday morning at 11:05 Eastern, 10:05 Central on AFR and online at afr.net. Now for the Friends of Israel, here's David Dolan with an eye on the Middle East.
Israeli officials continue to closely monitor the ongoing internal conflict in neighboring Syria. In recent weeks, they have been especially concerned over growing indications that the Syrian Assad regime is taking steps to deploy its large chemical weapons arsenal. Military analysts say highly toxic chemical weapons could either be used against opposition Muslim militia forces trying to topple the regime, or possibly against Israel itself in a last-ditch attempt to unify the Syrian public against a common enemy. Syria has been in a formal state of war against the Jewish state ever since its leaders joined several other Arab countries in a declaration of war in 1948. Earlier this month, the Sunday Times of London newspaper reported that Israeli security agents are working clandestinely to thwart Syrian dictator Bashar Assad's ability to unleash his huge chemical and biological weapons stockpile against his foreign and/or domestic enemies. The report said Israel possesses more intelligence information about the exact locations and amounts of such Syrian non-conventional weapons than other Western nations.
Over the years, the Friends of Israel has produced several important videos that will help you better understand Scripture and the biblical basis for supporting Israel. A brief description of each DVD title in the Friends of Israel Video Classics series can be found at foi.org/classics. The Friends of Israel Video Classics DVDs can be purchased in our web store. Just visit foi.org/classics. Once again, that's foi.org/classics.
News, pop culture, and the quirkier side of life. The Todd Starnes Commentary.
President Obama is going after the guns. Yesterday, he announced the creation of a commission to determine just how that will happen. Folks, I'm just confused. The president says gun violence claims 10,000 American lives every year. Well, what about automobile accidents? More than 32,000 Americans died in car crashes last year. Should the federal government ban the stick shift? Should they confiscate four-wheel drives? Or what about alcohol abuse? The Centers for Disease Control says more than 24,000 Americans died from some sort of alcohol-induced event. Why isn't President Obama declaring war on the Appletini? Why hasn't the White House shut down their brew house? The fact of the matter is this. What happened in Newtown, Connecticut was a terrible tragedy. Now is the time for grieving and mourning, not making politics and policy. I'm Todd Starnes.
You're listening to Today's Issues with Tim Wildman and Tony Perkins. Email your comments to comments@afr.net. Past broadcasts of Today's Issues are available for listening and viewing in the archive at afr.net. Now, back to more of Today's Issues.